She had always loved the piano. From the moment she first pressed a key, she felt something stir inside her. It was not just a sound, but a feeling, like the world had opened a little window just for her. Every afternoon when the sun poured its light into her small room, she would sit on the old wooden bench, her fingers trembling slightly at first, then moving with more confidence as she pressed the keys. The piano was not new. Its black and white keys were worn in some places, and the edges of the bench were chipped from years of use. But it did not matter. For her, it was the only place that felt like home. Her family watched quietly from the doorway, sometimes smiling, sometimes worried. They knew how much she loved music, but they also knew that not everyone would understand. In the small town where they lived, people often laughed at anything that seemed different or unusual. Children teased each other for small things, and adults whispered about those who tried something ambitious. But she did not care. She had a dream, even if no one else could see it yet. One day her school announced a talent show. It was meant to be fun, but for her it was something more. This was her chance to play in front of people, to let them hear what she felt every time she sat at the piano. She wanted them to understand, even just for a moment, the world that lived inside her music. She practiced for weeks, repeating the same songs until her fingers knew each note by heart. She stayed up late, sometimes until her eyes hurt and the room felt too quiet. She imagined herself on the stage, the piano shining under the lights and her music filling the room. But the closer the day came, the more nervous she became. Her stomach twisted into knots every time she thought about standing in front of everyone. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that fear was only part of the process. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, listening to recordings of famous pianists, imagining herself playing like them. She remembered the proud smiles of her family when she finally mastered a difficult piece. And most of all, she remembered the feeling in her heart when her fingers danced over the keys. That feeling was stronger than fear, and it gave her courage. On the day of the talent show, the school hall buzzed with excitement. Students laughed and shouted. Teachers tried to organize the crowd, and the smell of popcorn and snacks filled the air. She carried her sheet music carefully, her hands shaking slightly. When she arrived backstage, she saw other children performing tricks, singing songs, and telling jokes. They all seemed so confident, so loud, so sure of themselves. She felt small for a moment, wondering if she was making a mistake. Perhaps they would laugh at her too. Perhaps they would not understand the music the way she did. But she took a deep breath, clutched her sheet music, and reminded herself why she was here. She loved the piano, and no one could take that away. When it was her turn, she walked slowly to the stage. The bright lights made her squint, and she could hear the audience talking and laughing. Some of the students whispered to each other, pointing and giggling. "Look at her," one said. "She thinks she can play?" Another laughed and said, "I hope she doesn't mess it up." Their voices made her stomach tighten, but she forced herself to keep moving. She sat down on the bench, adjusted her sheet music, and took another deep breath. The room suddenly became quiet, and she realized all eyes were on her. The first touch of her fingers on the keys felt strange. They trembled slightly, and the sound seemed timid and small. A few students snickered, and she felt a hot flush of embarrassment. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered all the hours she had spent practicing alone in her room. She remembered the music she had imagined, the way it had lifted her spirit and made her feel alive. Slowly, she let her fingers relax, letting the music flow naturally. The first notes were soft and uncertain, but there was something in them that caught the attention of a few people in the audience. They stopped whispering, tilting their heads as if trying to understand what they were hearing. As she played, she became more confident. Her fingers moved faster, dancing over the keys, and the music started to grow richer and stronger. She poured her feelings into each note, letting the melody speak for her. Some of the children in the audience still laughed quietly at first, but slowly their expressions began to change. They leaned forward, curious now, their eyes wide with surprise. Teachers whispered to each other, nodding in approval, and a few parents in the back of the room smiled, realizing that something special was happening. The girl did not notice any of this. She was lost in the music, in the rhythm and emotion that had been inside her all along. She felt as if the piano had become an extension of herself, and each note she played was a part of her story. A boy in the front row, who had been one of the loudest in mocking her, now sat with his mouth slightly open. He looked around as if asking the people next to him, "Did you hear that?" A few girls who had whispered and giggled earlier were now silent. their hands folded on their laps, eyes fixed on her fingers moving across the keys. The more she played, the more the room seemed to change. The air felt electric, and even though she could still hear faint whispers, they were no longer mocking. They were curious, amazed, and quiet with wonder. The girl's heart began to beat faster, but not with fear. It was excitement, the kind that comes when you are doing something you were born to do. She remembered her family, the way they had encouraged her to follow her passion even when others doubted her. She thought of the nights she had stayed awake practicing, the way her fingers had learned to move with precision, and the way music had always made her feel alive. She let all of that flow through her as she played, and the piano responded to her touch as if it knew her soul. A teacher walked quietly to the side of the stage, her eyes moist with admiration. She had seen many children perform, but something about this girl was different. It was not just her technical skill, but the emotion she put into each note, the story she told without words. The audience began to sit straighter, captivated by the music. Even the students who had been the loudest in their mockery could not look away. They whispered among themselves not to make fun, but to share their amazement. "She's good," one of them said quietly. "Really good." Another nodded, unable to speak, his eyes glued to the piano. By the time the first piece ended, there was a moment of stunned silence. The girl sat there, her fingers hovering over the keys, unsure if she should continue or stop. She looked up at the audience and saw something she had never expected: respect. Their laughter and mockery were gone. They were watching her with genuine admiration. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as a child trying to play the piano, but as a musician sharing a part of herself with the world. She smiled softly, a mix of relief and pride filling her chest. She had faced their mockery, and for the first time, she had turned it into recognition. The applause started slowly, then grew louder and louder, filling the hall with a sound that made her heart soar. She looked at the people around her, amazed that they had come to understand, if only for a moment, the music that lived inside her. Some students clapped with hesitant excitement, while others cheered with genuine enthusiasm. Teachers and parents stood up, giving her a standing ovation. The girl's cheeks burned with emotion. She felt a mix of disbelief, happiness, and gratitude. She had not only played the piano, but had touched the hearts of everyone in the room. The mockery that had seemed so loud moments ago was now a distant memory, replaced by admiration and awe. She realized something important that day. It was not about being perfect or playing flawlessly. It was about sharing a part of yourself, letting your passion shine and trusting that it could reach others. She had faced doubt, fear, and ridicule, and had found her strength in the very thing that made her different. That moment, standing at the piano with the audience captivated by her music, was more than just a performance. It was a turning point, a moment that would stay with her forever. She had discovered that true talent is not just about skill, but about courage, heart, and the willingness to keep going even when others doubt you. When she finally left the stage, her legs felt weak, but her spirit was strong. People came up to her, smiling and praising her. Some of the students who had laughed earlier apologized. Some simply stared in awe. She did not mind the past mockery anymore. She had learned that it did not define her. What mattered was what she could create, the joy she could bring, and the confidence she could build in herself. That day, she had faced the world with nothing but her music, and the world had listened. From that day on, she played the piano with a new sense of pride and determination. She knew there would be challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, and perhaps even ridicule again, but she also knew that she had the courage to face them, and the music to carry her through. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a voice, a friend, and a reminder that even in the face of mockery, talent and heart could shine brightly. And so she continued to practice, to play, and to share her music with anyone willing to listen. She did not play for praise or recognition, though it was nice to receive. She played because it was who she was, because it made her feel alive, and because she had learned that even the smallest notes could touch hearts in ways words never could. The mockery of the past was gone, replaced by a newfound respect and admiration that would inspire her for years to come. The day after the talent show, the girl woke up with a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness. She could still hear the sound of applause in her mind, feel the warmth of the lights, and remember the astonished faces of her classmates. Even though she had faced mockery just moments before her performance, she had found something far more important: her own strength. But now, as she looked out the window at the quiet street and the gentle sway of the trees in the morning breeze, a new question arose in her mind. What would come next? Could she keep this feeling alive? Or was it just a fleeting moment of luck? Her family sat around the breakfast table chatting quietly. They had been just as proud as she had imagined, though they tried to hide their excitement so she would not feel pressured. Her mother poured milk into her glass, smiling softly, while her father adjusted the newspaper he was reading. "You played beautifully yesterday," her mother said, her voice calm but filled with pride. "I think everyone could see how much you love the piano." The girl nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was comforting to hear, and yet she knew that words could not fully capture what she felt when her fingers touched the keys. School that day felt different. As she walked through the hallways, she noticed students glancing at her with curiosity instead of laughter. Some even gave her small smiles or nodded in recognition. It was not a complete change. There were still whispers, a few sideways glances, and the occasional smirk, but it was enough to remind her that yesterday had made a difference. She felt a mix of relief and pride. The memory of mockery was still there, but now it seemed smaller, distant, almost like a shadow that could not reach her anymore. During music class, the teacher called her to demonstrate a piece she had been practicing. Her hands hovered over the piano keys and she felt a rush of nerves, but this time it was different. It was not fear. It was excitement, a spark of anticipation. As her fingers pressed the keys, the notes flowed smoothly, each sound clear and expressive. Some students leaned forward, listening intently, and even those who had been skeptical before looked impressed. For the first time, she realized that music had the power to change how people saw her, not just for a moment, but in a way that could leave a lasting impression. After school, she stayed behind in the music room. The hallways were quiet, and the sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long, warm shadows on the wooden floor. She played her favorite pieces over and over, experimenting with dynamics and tempo, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Each time she played, she discovered something new. A soft passage became even more touching, a fast section more thrilling. She realized that the piano was not just an instrument, it was a companion that could respond to her moods, her thoughts, and even her fears. The music she created in those moments was honest, pure, and uniquely hers. Later that afternoon, a group of students approached her. At first, she felt a pang of worry, fearing it might be teasing or criticism. But when they spoke, their voices were quiet and sincere. "We wanted to tell you. Yesterday, your performance was amazing," one of them said. "We didn't think someone could play like that." Another nodded in agreement, adding, "It was really beautiful. You made the piano sound like it was alive." The girl felt her chest swell with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. She had expected more ridicule, more laughter, but instead she found admiration and respect. It was an unfamiliar feeling, but a welcome one. That evening, she returned home and found herself thinking about the future. She wanted to improve, to become even better. But she also wondered if she could ever play for larger audiences, if people outside her small town could ever hear her music. She remembered watching videos of world-famous pianists, their fingers moving so quickly and gracefully over the keys, their music filling enormous halls. She had once thought it impossible for someone like her to reach that level, but now the idea did not seem so far away. Perhaps with hard work and dedication, she could achieve something similar. Her parents noticed her determination and offered their support in small ways. Her father helped her adjust the piano stool to the perfect height, making sure her posture was correct, while her mother encouraged her to practice regularly without feeling rushed or pressured. They never demanded perfection. They only wanted her to enjoy the music and grow at her own pace. That balance of guidance and freedom gave her confidence. She felt safe to explore, to experiment, and to make mistakes without fear of judgment. The following weekend, her school announced a community event, inviting students to perform in front of townspeople. Many of her friends and classmates were nervous, unsure of what to play or how to perform, but she felt a renewed sense of courage. She wanted to participate, to show not only her skill but also her love for the piano. It was not about proving anything to anyone, at least not entirely. It was about sharing something that had become a part of her, something she could no longer keep to herself. As the day of the event approached, she practiced even more, not out of pressure but out of excitement. She discovered new pieces to play, experimenting with melodies she had never tried before. Her fingers moved more confidently across the keys, and she began to notice subtle improvements in her technique. Each day, the piano became less of a challenge and more of a natural extension of herself. Music was no longer something she only performed. It was something she lived. On the day of the community event, she arrived early to set up and get comfortable with the piano. The hall was larger than the school auditorium, filled with folding chairs and decorations. The townspeople arrived slowly, filling the seats with polite chatter and curious glances. She could see the anticipation in their faces, some eager to hear a familiar tune, others perhaps unsure of what to expect. She felt her hands tremble slightly, but she reminded herself of yesterday, of how she had faced mockery and turned it into recognition. This was a chance to do the same on a bigger stage. When it was her turn to perform, she walked to the piano with steady steps. The audience quieted immediately, sensing that something important was about to happen. She sat down, adjusted her sheet music, and took a deep breath. Her fingers touched the keys lightly at first, producing soft, gentle notes. Slowly, the music began to build, growing in complexity and emotion. Each chord she played seemed to resonate through the hall, reaching every corner. People leaned forward, captivated by the sound, and she could feel their attention as a wave rolling toward her. As she continued, her nerves melted away completely. She played with freedom, letting her emotions guide every movement. The music rose and fell like the tide, soft and tender one moment, powerful and commanding the next. She realized she was no longer performing for approval or recognition. She was performing to express herself, to share the music that lived inside her, and the audience responded. Faces softened, eyes glistened, and a hush fell over the room as everyone became absorbed in the melody. Even those who had been skeptical about her talent before were now leaning in, captivated by the beauty and emotion of her playing. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. It was not just polite clapping, it was genuine, heartfelt appreciation. People stood to cheer, some even whistling softly, clearly moved by what they had heard. She smiled, feeling a rush of pride and joy unlike anything she had ever experienced. The music had spoken for her, and it had been understood. She felt a sense of belonging, knowing that for the first time, her passion had connected with others in a profound way. After the performance, several adults approached her, offering compliments and encouragement. "You have a rare gift," one woman said, her eyes shining. "Keep practicing and don't ever let anyone tell you that you can't do this." A man nodded, adding, "It's not just skill, it's your heart in the music. That is something special." Even some of her peers who had been distant or doubtful now looked at her with new respect. The girl realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of skill, emotion, and courage that made her performance unforgettable. That night, she returned home and sat by the window, reflecting on the day. She thought about how far she had come since the first time she had faced mockery at the school talent show. She remembered the fear, the uncertainty, and the nervousness, and contrasted it with the pride and confidence she now felt. She realized that each moment, even the difficult ones, had led her to this point. The mockery had not defeated her. Instead, it had strengthened her, forcing her to dig deeper, to practice harder, and to believe in herself. She picked up her sheet music once more and played softly, letting the notes fill the quiet room. The piano became her companion again, responding to her thoughts and emotions. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt and perhaps even criticism, but she also knew that she had discovered something invaluable, the ability to trust herself, to express her heart through music, and to connect with others in a way words could not achieve. And as she played into the night, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. This was only the beginning. The music she loved so much would take her further than she had ever imagined. Each day would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to share her gift. She felt ready, not just to face the world, but to embrace it one note at a time. The girl woke up that morning with her heart beating faster than usual. Today was not just any day. Today, she would perform at a regional music competition that would gather students from nearby towns. She had never played for so many people before, and the thought of it both excited and frightened her. She knew this was an important step. It was a chance to show not only her skills but also her passion, the same passion that had allowed her to face mockery and turn it into admiration. She took a deep breath, feeling the nervous flutter in her stomach, and reminded herself that she loved the piano, more than she feared the audience. Her morning was quiet, filled with the familiar sounds of her family going about their routines. Her father quietly sipped tea, glancing at her with a proud smile, while her mother fussed over her hair and checked that she had everything she needed. "Remember," her mother said softly, "it's not about winning. Play with your heart and the rest will follow." Those words lingered with her. She had learned over time that music was more than competition. It was connection, expression, and courage. But she also knew that today the stakes were higher, and the challenge would push her to her limits. On the way to the competition hall, the streets were busier than usual. Students were carrying instruments, teachers were organizing, and families walked quickly, trying to find their seats. The girl held her sheet music close, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility and hope. She noticed other children carrying violins, flutes, and even larger instruments. Some looked confident, chatting easily with friends, while others fidgeted nervously like she felt. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of all the hours she had spent practicing alone in her room, the late nights, and the quiet mornings. She had prepared for this. She could do it. When she entered the competition hall, it was larger than any place she had ever performed. The stage was elevated, with bright lights shining down, and rows of chairs stretching far back into the room. The judges' table was at the front, papers and pens ready, their faces serious and attentive. The audience slowly filled in, murmuring and shuffling in their seats. She felt a slight tremor in her hands, but she gripped her sheet music tightly and walked to the stage with steady steps. The moment she sat at the piano, the bright lights made her squint and a hush fell over the room. She could hear the faint rustle of the audience, the occasional cough, but mostly, there was silence, a silence filled with expectation. As she opened her sheet music, she felt a moment of hesitation. Her fingers hovered over the keys, almost afraid to begin, but then she closed her eyes for a brief second, recalling the faces of her classmates from the talent show, the gentle encouragement of her family, and the quiet moments when she had poured her heart into the piano at home. Slowly, she pressed the first note. It was soft and careful, almost hesitant, but it carried a sense of honesty. She began to play, letting the music flow naturally, not forcing it, but letting it grow from within. At first, some in the audience looked around, whispering quietly to each other. A few students exchanged skeptical glances, perhaps remembering past performances where talent had not lived up to the hype. But as the notes continued, something started to change. The melody grew more confident, richer, and more expressive. Her fingers moved faster, dancing across the keys with precision and grace. Each chord seemed to fill the room, resonating with emotion that went beyond technical skill. The music spoke of her journey, the late-night practice, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs over mockery. A few students leaned forward, captivated by what they were hearing. Teachers at the side of the stage exchanged quiet words, impressed by the control and emotion in her playing. Some parents wiped away tears, moved by the beauty and purity of the sound. The girl did not notice any of this. She was fully absorbed in the music. Her heart guided her fingers, and the piano seemed to respond as if it had always known her, understood her, and wanted to share her story with everyone listening. As the piece built to a more complex section, her confidence grew. Her fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with precision, while her emotions poured into the music. The audience could feel it. The rise and fall of the melody, the gentle softness, the sudden bursts of power. Even the judges, who were usually composed and serious, leaned slightly forward, watching closely. The girl's nerves melted away entirely. She was no longer playing to impress or to win. She was playing because she had something to say, something that only music could express. A boy in the front row, who had been whispering and smirking moments ago, now sat completely still. His eyes were wide, glued to the piano, unable to look away. Several of his friends had the same reaction. They were stunned, realizing that the girl they had underestimated was capable of something extraordinary. The whispers were gone. The laughter that had once seemed inevitable had vanished, replaced by awe and admiration. The girl's music had transformed the room. She had faced doubt, fear, and expectation, and now she was the one commanding attention, not with words, but with sound. Halfway through her performance, she hit a section that was particularly challenging. It required speed, accuracy, and emotional control all at once. Her hands moved like lightning, yet they never lost touch with the feeling behind each note. The audience gasped softly, sensing the difficulty and appreciating the mastery it required. Some students exchanged looks of disbelief while others whispered to each other, "How can she play like that?" The girl did not let the moment distract her. She focused on the music, letting it carry her through, knowing that every note was a story she wanted to tell. The final part of her piece was a gentle, lingering melody. She slowed her hands, letting each note resonate fully, creating a sense of calm and reflection. It was a perfect contrast to the faster, more intense sections earlier. The audience felt the shift, experiencing the full range of emotions she had poured into her music. Some leaned back in their chairs, eyes closed, as if letting the melody wash over them. Others sat in complete stillness, not wanting to break the spell. The girl played every note with care, knowing this was the moment where everything would settle, where her music would leave its lasting impression. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a pause. A moment of silence heavy with awe and respect. Then the room erupted in applause. It was loud, sustained, and filled with genuine appreciation. The girl's cheeks flushed with emotion. She had expected nervous claps or polite recognition, but this was something different. People were on their feet, cheering, some whistling softly, others clapping with enthusiasm. The music had done what words could not. It had stunned the audience, erased doubt, and captured their hearts. The judges stood and applauded as well, their expressions serious but impressed. One of them approached her with a gentle smile, saying, "Your performance was remarkable. It is rare to see such skill combined with genuine emotion in someone so young. You have a true gift." The girl nodded, barely able to speak, her heart racing with a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. The room that had once been filled with doubt and anticipation was now filled with respect and admiration. She realized that she had not only overcome her own fears, but had also changed how others perceived her. After she stepped off the stage, several students and parents came up to her. Some asked questions about how she learned. Others simply offered praise. A few of the students who had doubted her before whispered apologies, and she smiled, understanding that their surprise had been genuine. She had faced mockery before, but this time, she had turned it into something far more powerful. She had shown that talent combined with heart and determination could change minds and hearts alike. Later that evening, she returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. She sat by the window, the sounds of the town fading into quiet night, and reflected on the day. She remembered the nervous steps onto the stage, the first tentative notes, the growing confidence, and finally, the stunned silence and applause. She realized that music had become her voice, her way of expressing everything that words could not. She had faced fear and doubt and had emerged stronger, more confident and more determined than ever. She also realized that this was just the beginning. The performance had shown her what was possible, but there were more challenges ahead. There would be harder pieces, bigger audiences, and moments of self-doubt, but she felt ready. She knew that her passion and persistence could carry her through. The piano had always been more than an instrument. It was her companion, her confidant, and now her bridge to the world. She felt a quiet determination to continue, to grow, and to share her music with anyone willing to listen. That night she played once more, softly and gently, letting the music flow freely. Her fingers moved naturally without pressure or fear. Each note seemed to tell a story of perseverance, courage, and triumph. She knew that one day, her music might reach far beyond the small halls and community stages she had known. But for now it was enough to play, to feel, and to let the piano speak for her. She had discovered something that could not be taken away, the power of her own talent and the courage to show it to the world, even when others doubted her. And as she played, the girl felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced her fear, turned mockery into admiration, and stunned everyone with her music. It was a moment that would stay with her forever, a memory of triumph that would inspire her for years to come. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but also with joy, growth, and the endless beauty of music. After the competition, the girl returned home feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands ached slightly from playing, but her heart was light, filled with pride and wonder. She had faced one of the biggest stages of her young life, and she had done more than play notes correctly. She had told her story through music. But the experience did not end on the stage. The days that followed were filled with new emotions, new challenges, and a growing sense of recognition that she had never experienced before. The very next morning at school, whispers and smiles greeted her in the hallways. It was no longer the same nervous curiosity or quiet teasing from before. Now students who had ignored her or doubted her ability approached, asking questions and complimenting her performance. "Your piece yesterday. It was incredible," one of her classmates said, eyes wide with admiration. "How did you do that?" Another student asked if she could teach them a few simple tunes. The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to have her talent recognized, not just by adults or teachers, but by her peers. Her music teacher stopped by during the morning class, a look of pride on her face. "You played beautifully," she said softly. "I think the judges were as impressed as the audience. Your dedication and emotion came through every note. Keep this up and I am certain you have a bright future ahead." The girl smiled shyly, her fingers absent-mindedly tapping on her desk. She had heard praise before, but this felt different. It was specific, sincere, and based on the emotion she had poured into her performance. It made her realize that music was not only about technical skill, but also about expression, connection, and heart. The rest of the week felt like a blur. People from her town started recognizing her in small ways. At the market, a shopkeeper nodded and said, "We heard about your performance. Well done." On the street, a neighbor complimented her, telling her parents that her music had touched many people. Even the students who had been the harshest critics weeks before now offered smiles of encouragement. It was a strange but beautiful shift. The mockery she had faced in the past felt like a distant memory, replaced by admiration and respect that she had earned through effort and courage. Despite all the recognition, she remained humble. She knew that talent alone was not enough. Hours of practice, dedication, and the willingness to face fear had brought her here. She continued to sit at the piano each day, exploring new pieces and refining old ones. The piano became more than an instrument. It was a space where she could express herself freely, a place to process her emotions, and a companion that grew with her every day. She discovered new ways to play, experimenting with rhythm, dynamics, and tone, learning to tell stories through sound. Each note became a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. One afternoon, the school invited her to play at a small community gathering. This time, it was not a competition, but an opportunity to share her music with people who genuinely wanted to hear it. The hall was decorated with flowers and banners, filled with families, teachers, and neighbors. She felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, but it was not fear, it was anticipation. She remembered the applause, the respect, and the joy her music had brought before. She knew that today would be another chance to connect, to share, and to grow. As she sat at the piano, she looked at the audience and smiled softly. The room quieted immediately, as if sensing the importance of the moment. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The notes were gentle at first, soft like a whisper, and gradually built into a rich, flowing melody. She played with the confidence that had been growing inside her over the past weeks, letting her emotions guide each chord. The audience listened, rapt and silent, moved by the beauty and authenticity of her music. Children leaned forward, adults closed their eyes, and some even wiped away quiet tears. After the performance, the applause was steady and warm. She stood, slightly overwhelmed by the reaction, and realized that she had accomplished something more than technical excellence. She had touched hearts, made people feel something, and shared a piece of herself in a way that words could never do. The recognition was sweet, but what mattered more was the connection she had created through her music. She understood that this was her true reward, the ability to make people pause, reflect, and feel. News of her performance began to spread beyond her school. A local newspaper wrote a small article, highlighting her talent and her recent competition success. "A young pianist who turns mockery into music," the headline read. Her parents quietly pinned the article to the refrigerator, proud but careful not to overwhelm her with attention. The girl read the words, feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. She knew that recognition was temporary, but the love for her craft and the discipline she had developed were lasting. It was a reminder that she had the ability to impact others, and with that came responsibility. In the following weeks, she was invited to play at various small events, a town fair, a library gathering, and even a school assembly. Each time she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. But she also noticed something new, the joy of sharing her music with people who genuinely wanted to listen. The nervousness that had plagued her early performances faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that grew stronger with each note. She discovered that performing was not just about her. It was about creating an experience for everyone who listened. Music became a way to communicate without words, to bridge gaps, and to leave a lasting impression. Even at home, she began teaching herself more challenging pieces. She stayed after school to practice, often losing track of time as her fingers moved across the keys. Each evening, she reflected on her progress and set small goals for the next day. She experimented with composition, trying to create original melodies that reflected her emotions. She realized that her growth as a musician was not just in mastering notes, but in understanding how to express herself fully through the piano. Every day brought new lessons, and every lesson brought new confidence. One particular afternoon, she faced a challenge. She had been learning a complicated piece that required speed, precision, and emotional control all at once. Her fingers stumbled over a few sections, and frustration began to rise. She felt the familiar sting of doubt creeping in, but then she paused, closed her eyes, and reminded herself of how far she had come. She remembered the talent show, the regional competition, and the community gatherings where she had played with her heart. She took a deep breath and tried again, slower at first, then with growing confidence. By the end of the session, she had mastered the piece, and a sense of accomplishment filled her completely. She realized that perseverance, not just talent, was what would carry her forward. As weeks turned into months, her reputation continued to grow. Teachers praised her dedication, peers admired her skill, and families in the town came to see her play whenever they could. But she remained grounded. She knew that recognition was fleeting, and that the most important thing was her love for music. She continued to practice daily, explore new pieces, and challenge herself in ways that kept her growing. She learned to take criticism constructively, to embrace mistakes as opportunities, and to celebrate progress no matter how small. At school, some students who had once mocked her began showing genuine interest in music. They asked her for tips, requested her help with practice, and even tried learning new pieces inspired by her dedication. She welcomed their questions with patience, remembering how much encouragement had helped her on her own journey. She realized that part of her growth was also in inspiring others, not through words but through example. Her story was no longer just about her own triumph. It was about how talent, courage, and persistence could influence others in meaningful ways. One evening, as she practiced alone in her room, she paused and looked at the worn keys of her piano. She traced her fingers over them lightly, remembering the first time she had sat on this bench, nervous and uncertain. So much had changed since then. The mockery, the fear, the doubt, it all seemed like a distant memory now. She had faced it, overcome it, and grown stronger because of it. And yet she knew there was still a long journey ahead. There would be bigger stages, more challenging pieces, and moments of doubt to face. But she also knew that she had the courage, passion, and dedication to continue. That night she played softly, letting her emotions guide her fingers. The music filled the quiet room, echoing through the small house. Each note carried a story of struggle, triumph, and hope. She smiled, knowing that her journey was far from over. She had faced mockery, stunned her audience with her talent, and now she was discovering the joy and responsibility that came with recognition. She understood that music was more than notes. It was a voice, a bridge, and a way to touch lives. And as she played, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She had learned that true success was not in applause or praise, but in the ability to express herself fully, to face challenges with courage, and to inspire others through her dedication. The piano had become her companion, her teacher, and her voice. She knew that the path ahead would have its difficulties, but it also held endless possibilities, beauty, and growth. She felt ready to continue, to share, and to let her music shine in ways she had never imagined before. Time passed, and the girl continued her journey with the piano, her love for music growing stronger with each day. What had once been a small passion in her room had now become a guiding force in her life. She practiced daily, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for a quiet half hour when the world felt too loud. Each time her fingers touched the keys, she felt a sense of peace and joy that nothing else could provide. Music had become more than an activity or hobby. It was her voice, her companion, and her way of making sense of the world around her. People in her town had begun to recognize her wherever she went. Friends, neighbors, teachers, and even strangers would mention her performances, praising her skill and dedication. but she remained humble. She never played to gain attention or accolades. She played because it made her heart feel alive, because it was a part of who she was. She understood that recognition was a gift, but her true motivation came from within, from the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her own hands, from the connection she could forge through music, and from the courage she had discovered inside herself. One afternoon, a letter arrived from a music academy in the nearby city. The letter was an invitation for her to attend a summer program for young, talented pianists. Her parents read it aloud with her, their faces filled with pride and surprise. The girl felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was a new stage, a bigger opportunity than she had ever faced. She thought about all the practice, all the performances, and all the moments of doubt she had overcome. She knew this was another step in her journey, a chance to grow, learn, and share her talent with people she had never met. She accepted the invitation, her heart racing with anticipation. The academy was larger than anything she had imagined. The halls were lined with grand pianos, and students from many towns and cities had come to participate. Some were confident, some nervous, and some even seemed intimidating in their skill. The girl felt a familiar flutter in her stomach, but it was accompanied by excitement rather than fear. She reminded herself of everything she had accomplished, the moments when she had faced doubt and mockery and had turned it into recognition and respect. She knew that courage and dedication were just as important as talent. During the program, she met other young pianists who were talented in their own ways. Some had trained for years, some had performed in large venues before. But she noticed something important. Everyone had their own struggles and insecurities. Sharing music with them, she realized that talent was not about competition. It was about growth, learning, and expressing oneself. She made friends with some of the students, sharing tips, practicing together, and encouraging one another. She discovered that collaboration could enhance her skills and open new ways of thinking about music. The days at the academy were filled with intense practice, lessons, and performances. She learned new techniques, tackled complex pieces, and explored musical expression in ways she had never imagined. At times, the challenge was daunting. There were moments when her fingers stumbled over difficult passages, when she felt discouraged or frustrated, but each time she remembered the first time she had faced mockery in the talent show, the first time she had turned doubt into applause, and the first time she had played in front of a larger audience. She realized that setbacks were part of growth and perseverance was the key to improvement. One evening, the academy held a small concert for the students to perform for each other. The girl was nervous as she had never played in such an intimate and critical setting. She could feel the eyes of her peers on her as she walked to the piano. But instead of fear, she felt determination. She thought of the countless hours she had spent practicing, the challenges she had overcome, and the joy she had found in music. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and let her fingers move across the keys. The music flowed smoothly, each note carefully chosen yet full of emotion. Her peers listened in silence, captivated by the richness and depth of her performance. Some whispered to each other, expressing amazement at her technique and expression. The applause at the end was genuine and heartfelt. She realized that her music could connect with people she had never met, that it could touch hearts in ways words could not. The recognition felt wonderful, but what mattered most was the understanding that music could communicate her feelings and experiences directly to others. After the concert, several students approached her to compliment her and ask for guidance. She smiled and offered advice, remembering the encouragement she had received from teachers and family in her own journey. She discovered that sharing her knowledge and supporting others in their growth was as rewarding as performing itself. She had learned that talent alone was not enough. Empathy, kindness, and the willingness to help others were equally important in her journey. The weeks at the academy flew by. Each day brought new challenges, new pieces to master, and new experiences that broadened her understanding of music. She learned to play with more confidence, to interpret pieces with greater depth, and to express her emotions through subtle changes in tone and rhythm. The piano became an even more integral part of her life, a tool for personal growth, expression, and connection. She discovered that music could be a bridge between people, a way to communicate feelings, stories, and experiences that words often failed to capture. By the end of the program, she had grown not only as a musician but also as a person. She had learned to trust her abilities, embrace challenges, and share her passion with others. The instructors praised her dedication, skill, and emotional expression, while her peers admired her humility and willingness to help. She realized that her journey was about more than just performing. It was about learning, growing, and inspiring others through her dedication and talent. When she returned home, she was welcomed with warmth and pride by her family. They had missed her and were eager to hear about her experiences. She told them about the academy, the new pieces she had learned, and the friendships she had formed. She spoke of the challenges she had faced and the moments of triumph, remembering the same feelings she had experienced during her first talent show and her regional competition. She realized that every step of her journey had built upon the previous one, each moment of doubt, practice, and performance leading her to new heights. Back in her hometown, she continued to play, but now with a new perspective. She played not only for herself but also for others, sharing her music at school events, community gatherings, and small performances wherever she could. People came to recognize her talent and dedication, and her performances inspired younger students to pursue their own passions, no matter the obstacles. She had become a role model in her community, not because she sought recognition, but because her journey and perseverance spoke for themselves. The girl also began to compose her own pieces, inspired by her experiences and emotions. She discovered the joy of creating music that was entirely her own, blending her technical skill with her personal expression. Each composition told a story, a memory, a feeling, or a moment in her life. She realized that music was not only a way to perform, but also a way to communicate her inner world, a language that could be understood universally. The piano had become her partner in self-expression, and she embraced this new dimension of her passion with excitement and curiosity. As time went on, she participated in more competitions, concerts, and events, each performance more confident and expressive than the last. She faced new challenges and occasional criticism, but she no longer feared it. She understood that growth came from facing difficulty, learning from mistakes, and staying true to her passion. She remembered the mockery she had faced in the beginning, and she realized that those moments had shaped her resilience, determination, and courage. Without them, she might never have discovered the strength and dedication that now defined her. One evening, after returning from a particularly challenging performance, she sat alone at her piano. The room was quiet, the fading sunlight casting soft shadows across the keys. She played softly, letting the music flow naturally, reflecting on her journey. She thought about every step, the first time she had been mocked, the first standing ovation, the lessons at the music academy, and the countless hours of practice. Each moment had shaped her, taught her patience, and strengthened her love for music. She realized that her journey was ongoing, but the foundation she had built would carry her through anything.